Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar from Reuters Events, the harness automation to future-proof your business. And we have a really exciting mix of people from across PNC and the life, accident, and health space. So this is actually going to be, and tech providers as well. I should shout out to Blue Prism, who gets to see across both of those spaces as well. Really rich conversation from multiple perspectives, which is always a unique opportunity that we get to have. This event from Reuters Events this webinar is part of a broader series for the upcoming Future of Insurance event, the live Future of Insurance USA Virtual Summit that's happening November 16th through 18th virtually. So had been planned for Chicago, but now of course you can get there and attend no matter where you are. So fantastic opportunity to get to hear from folks like we have on the panel today and more leaders across the industry. I've really sort of been starstruck with some of the people who are already announced as speakers. So do check that out, register today, and make sure you attend that event November 16th through 18th. But today for this panel, we have an amazing set of guests to speak to you. And I'm gonna start off with Claire Burns, who is the Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Strategy Officer for Prudential International. In that role, she oversees brand and marketing, digital transformation, product management, and business strategy for the international operations of Prudential Financial. And prior to joining Prudential, Claire was a Chief Customer Officer for MetLife, Chief Strategy Officer for a subsidiary of AIG, Alico. And I'm very excited to open up with Claire.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us and inviting Prudential. It's really a privilege to be part of this panel, so greatly appreciated. I want to just start quickly by just giving a little background on Prudential. I think when most people in the US think about Prudential, they think about it as a very old, it's actually 145-year-old US-based company. But we actually operate in 40 countries, and my remit is international, 51,000 employees across Prudential. We had 6.2 billion in earnings last year, and almost half of that was from international. So when you think about our business, yes, big US business, but also big international business. And we have a pretty substantial footprint in terms of where we cover, but I would say the vast majority of our business internationally comes from Japan. Japan, as many of you may know, is similar to the US market in that it's a very mature insurance market. I think it's 98% penetrated, so it doesn't grow very fast. But people do value their life insurance experience. And for us, that's our most differentiated market. We started as a very traditional captive distribution organization, and we still have that very traditional distribution model. But what's unique about us is the deep emotional connection that our agents have with their customers, and it really is unique. It's almost, people describe it almost as cult-like, although I don't like to use that expression. But what that means is that interaction between our agent and our customer doesn't require a lot of digital. The actual interaction, the customer wants that human touch, they want that emotional connection. But behind the scenes, in terms of getting our distribution agents access to the tools that they need, there's a lot of digital automation that we're undertaking to help support that business. At the same time, our aspiration is to grow our emerging markets businesses dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years. And we have a very enviable footprint. So we are in China, we are in India, we are in Brazil, we're in Indonesia, Mexico, and we recently started partnerships in Ghana and Kenya. So we're in some very fast growing markets, but we're very small in those markets. And the way you attract insurance customers, or any customers for that matter, in those markets is vastly different than the way you do it in the US and Japan. So for us, it means a fully digital interface. It means being able to attract customers with tailored, personalized offers that come to them real time on their smartphones, something we've never done a lot of in the US and in Japan. So for us, it's pretty new territory. So the challenge for us from a digital transformation perspective is twofold. One is really supporting that core business, and that's really enabling those agents all around the world, but especially in Japan and Korea, where we have the biggest numbers of agents. And then it's also to start to compete with companies like Zhong'an and Ping An and Alibaba in emerging markets where they are digitally native companies in many cases, or companies that rely very heavily on a lot of data. And for us, this is something new. So we're trying to build a new business while we're also preserving the core and continuing to grow them both. We've really divided our digital transformation agenda into 4 key opportunities. The first is really customer experience excellence, which is making sure that distribution, that digital direct-to-consumer interface in emerging markets is solid, is simple, is intuitive, is easy to interact with. The second is digitally empowering our agents and our life planners all around the world. The third is really getting to digitize processes and platforms. So how can we have the foundational pieces in place that can help all of that work really, really well? The fourth is getting to a data-driven organization, which is requiring us to think very differently about both our own data and then third-party data and how we integrate those together to maximize and optimize the experience. And then finally, one that's near and dear to all of us is this idea of a digital workforce. And for us as a 145-year-old insurer, we have a fairly traditional workforce. And so getting our company both to hire new talent, but also to think about talent differently, to think about agile teams, to think about how we work differently all around the world has been a bit of a challenge. I'd say we've got a multi-year, multi-million-dollar investment. So it's 140 million we're investing over the next 4 years. We started by building that digital workforce, building digital hubs. We built one in Brazil, one in India, one in Singapore. And those are leading our work, leading our API development, leading our data warehousing and all those efforts. We have the composition of multiple Scrum teams across those areas, and they kind of move from country to country working on technology initiatives that are scalable and reusable and can help us get to this new way of working that we're looking to in the future. We've really divided our programs into what we call foundational, what we call 10X, and then what we call sort of just enablement. So we're really trying to think not just about the core, but about how we can continually modify our business model and really make our company future ready, exactly as this program is describing. So our investments are in foundational, data lake, analytics, API management, cloud enablement. They are in digital platforms that can get us to scale, like a product configurator, so we can rapidly turn those products in emerging markets. Auto underwriting, which for us is again new territory. We need that underwriting to be simple and to be automated and to be consistent in how we deliver it. Our distribution focus, as I talked about, which includes not just a workbench for our life planners that helps them really manage their day-to-day activities, but also lead management, smart product recommendations coming out of our data-driven organization. And then really getting to some customer experience tools that are both just simple, self-service, let them help themselves today, as well as we're building toward a wellness ecosystem, which seems like it might be a big buzzword, but we've partnered with Vitality, which is a well-known provider in the US with John Hancock and also in Asia with AIA. We are their partner in Latin America, starting in Argentina and Brazil, to give customers access to an ecosystem of wellness services and rewards that helps encourage the right kind of behavior to improve our mortality results while also improving their lives and well-being. So our biggest challenge, I would say, is really navigating priorities and really determining how to invest among all those different areas. And it's a constant dynamic process. But that's what we're up to. So eager to hear more from my peers on this webinar about what they're doing as well. So thank you.
That's fantastic, Claire. I was taking notes feverishly, and I've got questions to ask you, but we're going to save the Q&A for the end. But what I should say, and I neglected to say this in the beginning, first of all, I didn't tell you who I was, which I always forget to do, but I also didn't mention the Q&A. So please do ask questions. There's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, and you can post your questions there, and we will jump into Q&A at the end of the presentations. As I said, Claire, I've got some for you. So if other people don't, I'm just going to monopolize it. And I've got things I'm curious about. And before I introduce our next guest, I'll just introduce myself real quickly. I'm Brian Falchuk. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of The Future of Insurance: From Disruption to Evolution, which is ironically titled because it's the same name as the conference that this webinar is tied to, The Future of Insurance, November 16th to 18th from Reuters Events, that you can, of course, register for right now. Thank you again, Claire. And a reminder about the Q&A. I should have remembered myself at the beginning, but you can ask those questions at any time. And now I want to introduce Byron Hudson, who joins us from Blue Prism Cloud, where he's VP of Sales for America. He spent 7 years in the intelligent automation industry and a further 20 years working with leading software organizations, including Red Hat and Software AG. During his time with Blue Prism Cloud, he has personally guided a plethora of clients through their digital transformation journey with intelligent automation, and now leads the US sales team to help organizations across all industries to do the same. So with that, Byron, if you'd take us through your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So hello, everybody. My name is Byron. I'm talking to you today from Austin, Texas. I'm excited to be here and talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, which is the evolution of intelligent automation. And I've been in the integration and automation space most of my career. And what I've seen over the last 6 or 7 years is actually really exciting. And what we used to call science projects are really out there in the enterprise now and being used at scale. So it's a really exciting time to be in this space and see what our customers are doing today. So I'll start off, I'll talk a little bit about, our company, Blue Prism, what our evolution has been like, what our typical customer journey looks like, what our approach to automation is, where our customers are today, where they're trying to get going, where they're going in the future, and how we help them do that, and what may be some of the challenges that they face. So Blue Prism, we've come a long way since 2001 when we coined the term robotic process automation. And we started with a platform we built for financial services and insurance to be highly scalable, enterprise-grade controls around security and scalability. Also, the ability, obviously, to be able to create automations without having to be a programmer or no programming languages, and just having a secure platform built for the most highly regulated industries in the market. And we got a long way with just RPA, and the power behind robotic process automation and what it can do for your business. But we've also built a very robust partner network so that now we can give these bots, eyes and ears if they want to read documents, talk to people over chat, identify patterns. And if you want to connect these digital workers to your business process management solution, you can. So there's a very robust network out there with cognitive technologies and complementary technologies that extend the value of what you can do with RPA. And that has also done very well for us in the market and our customers, and given them the ability to address use cases that they probably weren't thinking about when they first invested in RPA. But now where we're seeing it going into our fastest market or growth, where we're experiencing the most growth and the fastest growth, is with our cloud team. And so that concept of this connected RPA, that multi-skilled digital worker that can read documents, have chat discussions, identify patterns, having all that in the cloud and then consuming it as a service has given our customers a lot of breathing room, if you will, to change their mindset from keeping the lights on to innovation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and how that has impacted the industry. So what we see, as far as the journey that I mentioned, we see it in 3 distinct waves. The first wave is very much ROI driven. Let's create efficiencies. Let's take that mundane, repetitive keystrokes, take that off of people's hands and return those hours back to the business and let those individuals do things that are much more meaningful to the business and also much more meaningful to their daily jobs and their career. So, when you're starting off thinking about things like form registration, integrating with all those legacy apps, inputting claims, things like that. And then wave 2, once you have established the digital workforce and we've gotten some ROI and we've created some efficiency gains, now let's really think about business performance and change the lens a little bit. And some of these waves kind of merge together, if you will, or sometimes you do one before the other. But now we're thinking about processing claims faster, getting paid faster, creating and paying out claims faster, and then creating, a better customer experience, improving our performance around customer engagement, being able to open up more self-service options because now we have these digital workers that can do all this cool stuff. We just need to expose them to our customers so that they can access them, whether that be through a chat channel or a web form or whatever it may be. And we've seen a lot of success in these first 2 waves. And wave 3, some of our customers are already there, many are not. And what is kind of holding them back, or how do we help our customers get to that 3rd wave is important. And, at this point, most of our customers, they believe in the technology already. It's been around long enough. It's proven itself. The cloud platform, even of itself, even though that seems fairly new, the cloud platform came over through acquisition. It's been around for 7 years. We have over 300 customers running mission critical applications on that platform. So the technology's proven, people trust it. They've seen the value they get from it, but how do we extend that value into something truly transformational? If we talk about the third wave, we're talking about business transformation. So a good example of that would be one of our customers put a new product out on the market where they needed to, they wanted to create different rates depending on how safe you drive, which required that you integrate with the actual sensors within the cars. You know, and having to set up or use traditional integration methods was going to take too long and too expensive. Having a digital workforce already in place allowed them to quickly roll that out and capitalize on that without a huge impact to their current operations or sacrificing some of the projects that IT was already working on. So how do you get there? You know, that's the question. And it's a lot of the things that hamper, I guess, or kind of hold you back in a lot of different other types of traditional projects. So one of those aspects just being that you have to have the capability. So the intelligence obviously has to be there. You know, robotic process automation on its own is one thing, but once you combine it with cognitive technologies, you can combine it with things like OCR to read documents, have chat discussions, identify patterns, speak in multiple different languages. Now you've taken this bot and you've turned it into a true digital worker by giving it all these different skills. So the question then becomes, do I build that myself? And do I go and procure and manage all these different vendors and integrate that into my platform? Or would I rather consume that as a service and have a fully integrated platform from the get-go that I can leverage when I need to? And then now that you have these capabilities, how do I govern that? How do I sweat these assets and make sure I get the most out of them? You know, do I have bots over here in HR that are kind of busy and then the IT bots are overloaded, finance bots and call center bots? What you really want is a digital workforce that you can leverage as a pool of labor. And you want that labor to swarm to wherever is needed, depending on how quickly this job needs to get done and how important it is. And that takes AI to do that. Otherwise, you have people doing that. So that's a really important aspect. How do I make sure my digital workforce is reacting to business needs very quickly and efficiently? And how am I making sure that I'm getting the most out of these digital workers and they're not sitting on the bench, if you will? And then can I go back in time and look at the heuristics and see where they've been effective and where they haven't been, and how am I getting the most out of them? So that's also another important layer they have to think about for the total operation and making sure you're getting the most out of your digital workers. And then of course, it's just IT agility and scalability, right? So if I have my entire IT team focused on, or not my entire IT, but if I have my IT team focused on keeping the lights on in a platform that is becoming more and more mission critical for the business, more and more important, and I'm worried about infrastructure, updates, upgrades, software, hardware. What if you could take that and offload it to a vendor to say, you do the upgrades, you do the updates, you worry about databases, you worry about making sure that the right technologies are curated in this platform, and I'll just consume it as a vendor. That completely changes the way you look at this technology and opens up your team to move from keeping the lights on to innovation. So essentially, by having that type of workforce now and where this is going, a true SaaS powered platform that allows you to consume this technology instead of becoming an intelligent automation company, you can just take those resources into being a better insurance company. And that's it from me.
That's great. Thank you, Byron. More questions flowing in. I was scribbling some myself, and I can start to see the interplay between what you just shared and what Claire shared, and some of the ways maybe we can implement some of the ideas that people are facing right now as we think about digital, think about supporting traditional values and traditional approaches to working, to interacting with customers, et cetera. So this Q&A is going to be lively. I can feel that already. And please do keep submitting questions. Next up, we have Jen Daniel. Jen joins us from Aflac, where she's VP of Premier Technology Partnerships. She spent 25 years specializing in group voluntary insurance and benefits technology. And in her role today, she's responsible for creating and growing profitable partnerships with Aflac's 20+ premier benefits administration partners. She works closely with the sales team to consult in sales situations involving technology, and she's also involved with internal Aflac teams to bring the technology point of view to the business as they expand and grow Aflac's products and services. And I'm very excited to have Jen here again today. Jen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. My pleasure. Very happy to be here, coming to you from lovely Des Moines, Iowa. So Austin sounds a little bit better, but Des Moines not so bad. So I'm going to take a little bit different approach than Claire and Byron did, and look at it more from the sales journey. And so when we think about automation, we think about disruption, right? To me, those go hand in hand. And so if we don't automate, we will be disrupted. And we constantly hear about how the insurance industry is ripe for disruption, and we have to change, we have to evolve. And so the way that we look at it at Aflac is we've kind of broken it out into what I will call the buckets of the sales journey, and really, mapping out each of those steps and looking at it from, okay, what are we doing today? Where could we leverage, a Blue Prism, or where could we leverage technology that we didn't build? I've worked at several carriers, and we have this thing about our technology and these antiquated systems, and, and it's either, okay, we need technology that can bring those forward, or we need to remove those and embrace new technology. And so we've kind of mapped it out from all of the different process steps and figured out, okay, where do we automate? How can we help? So if you look at, for example, just prospecting, helping our sales team go get leads, talk to the right people. When you read the stories about how do you sell or how do you buy, employers have already pretty much decided by the time they engage with the salesperson. So we need to take lessons from other industries from a sales perspective. How do we automate that for our sales team? So instead of them cold calling and going back to the same brokers, how do we give them the artificial intelligence, the data behind it, of who's ready to buy, what they're ready to buy, what their experience has been, so we can walk in with a solution versus just, hey, you want to buy some accident product for your employees? So automating that step and giving our sales team the tools to not just have the leads and know where to go, but having as simple as an app on their phone when the broker says, yeah, I need a quote, or I need marketing materials on that so I can show them to my clients. So how do we give them the tools so they don't have to go back to their desk, pull up a website, download a brochure, send it to the employer? Okay, brochures are old, so we don't want brochures anyhow. But just what are those tools available? And there's some really fun VC firms out there that have focused on this space. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is go and look and see what those folks are doing. And it's so innovative. It's so disruptive. And so how do we leverage those tools? So, lots of different things within the prospecting. And from a home office perspective, we want to know what's impactful, what's working. So being able to look at click rates, open rates, what are they forwarding? How long are they spending on our website? That's very, very insightful for us. So we can take it back to our counterparts and say, hey, this video that you did really, really worked, or no one's even opened this brochure, or the best day to send the email is on Monday at 10. Those things matter, and especially when everyone's digital and we have fewer face-to-face opportunities, we need to make sure that's impactful. So you go from prospecting into quoting. There's some great companies out there that have really helped automate the quoting process. So, whether it's a digital employee or getting employees out of it, letting a broker just go into the system and quote, and then having that quote be right. In working with technology platforms, so I work with a lot of the Ben admin platforms, HCM platforms out there. So your ADPs, your Business Solver, Empyrean, those types of companies. And I can tell you that if you quote products that don't fit on their platform, it's going to be a disaster. It's not going to work. So to be able to automate that from a quoting perspective, so as soon as the broker inputs that it's on, Business Solver, then all of a sudden, okay, well then you can't quote whole life, or you can't quote whatever it might be. So you eliminate the problems up front, as opposed to the employer feeling that pain down the road when, oh yeah, sorry, we can't really do that. So we'll duct tape and bubble gum it together to make it work. So lots of automation opportunities from a quoting perspective. I think the challenge there is, as carriers, a lot of us have legacy admin systems. And so it's how do you bolt on top versus replace, because it's a lot of work to kind of, move those systems. We're doing it right now, and it's been fun. I think from a technology perspective, where I'm seeing the most opportunity for automation is that case setup. So we've sold the case, and now we need to build it on a platform. And today, for most carriers and most platforms, it's okay, here's your integration kit. You hand it off to another person. They go in and they build all the products. They upload the rates, sometimes manually keying those in. Huge opportunity for errors. So where that's going, it's APIs, right? So the platform calls over to the carrier. They pull the data they need. There is no human interaction there, which means fewer errors, much faster turnaround. We can get products set up faster. The compliance area is happy because they know they're getting the right language. So that automation is going to be really big for our industry, I would say, in the next 2 years. There's some carriers that are doing it today, but a lot of them are just getting going with that piece of it. So case setup will be even easier for us. And then enrollment, which is probably near and dear to my heart, is how do we help employees? Right? That's what we're in this business for. It's to get them the products they need and then help them use them. So, Byron mentioned, how do we make claims easier and that whole process, but how do we help them enroll? I was at a conference recently and they had an Alexa, okay, it wasn't recently, it was a year ago because we can't do it now, but they had an Alexa demo and it was, Alexa, what medical plan should I enroll in? And while that seems kind of far-fetched, it's not, because she's now making appointments for us. She's knowing how often we're going to the doctor. With AI, she can pull in claims. So we have to start thinking that way. And what does that mean? It means we have to start designing products that can be enrolled that way. Because we sometimes in our industry want to have all the bells and whistles. We want to have this rider and that rider. And sometimes it just needs to be simple. And especially as we look to have platforms support that enrollment, it really needs to be simple. But employees want help. They want Amazon. Tell me what I should enroll in. Tell me what's easy. I used to do enrollment meetings, and that's the number one question you get. Well, just tell me where to, tell me where to invest my money if it's 401k, or tell me which medical plan. I can't do that. So how do we automate that with both decision support tools and the platforms, but with AI, with claims data? We have the information. It's pulling it together and saying, okay, Mr. Employee, here's what we recommend. You can make your decision based on that. So the enrollment is ripe for disruption. The platforms are really engaging some of those decision support tools. We as carriers are getting more and more data, and we're being asked to provide year-round support. It's not just those 2 weeks of enrollment. It's how do we engage employees? And this year, we all know it's been interesting, but employees are hungry for information. They're scared. They want to know now, okay, all those benefits that I've had that I didn't really pay attention to, now I want to know what's covered, what's not covered, what should I enroll in next year? So we're looking forward to enrollment season this year to be able to really help provide some of that support. And we're doing it digitally because you can't do face-to-face. So we're providing that as an ongoing solution. And then, the last two to touch on, files, well, they're going to go away, which is great. So we can automate files. We get rid of any of those paper processes, that back and forth file formatting, gone. With an API, we just transfer the data back and forth. And then claims. How do we get people the money they need when they need it? That's why they bought the insurance product. So being able to automate claims, what are we seeing there? Currently, it's a lot of auto adjudication. The claim comes in, you look across your entire book within Aflac and say, okay, well, they submitted a hospital indemnity claim, but it was because of an accident and they had a heart attack. So we pay all of those. That's pretty common common practice in the industry. But what's next is, could it be geofencing? I have an app on my phone. I walk into my doctor's office and says, hey, Jen, I see your, Dr. Sufkaboyd's office. All right, let's, do you want to file a claim? Click here. So easy, because if anyone's done it, you've had the easy claim and then you have the 16-page claim. So that's a process that I think is also ripe for disruption, for automation, and we just have to make it easy for employees because it's very important to them. That whole process, there's so many areas to automate, and we don't want to be disrupted. We want to disrupt ourselves. So it's fun. I enjoy it. I think there's a lot of, startups and great technology companies out there that we can partner with to get those things done.
Oh, that's great, Jen. And I think right now is one of those forcing mechanism periods where it does get to be fun, as difficult as it is and stressful and feeling a sort of existential crisis of how we survive. There's all these new tools and we don't have a choice but to move forward with them. So yeah, we can start recreating things because you don't have a choice.
Right.
So necessity is leading us to some interesting solutions. Thank you very much for that. If you have questions for Jen, make sure you put those in the Q&A. And bringing up the last speaker before we jump into that Q&A is Bob Taylor, who joins us as VP and Senior Corporate Counsel for Liberty Mutual's legal department in their legal strategic services organization. And Bob, I hope you touch on even briefly what that is, because when you and I talked before, I was sort of blown away. I've never heard of this sort of mentality at a carrier, and I think it's really empowering. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure.
Bob works within the corporate legal department in the strategic business operations as a manager of legal ideation and transformation. And he focuses on legal innovation, competitive intelligence, legal project management, legal information services, legal vendor management and strategy, and other litigation management related issues. And of course has been at Liberty for a while, but in the insurance industry and battling things out on the front lines, really going through the full picture of the legal side of our business. So Bob, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, for the introduction, and thank you, TR, for hosting this. I really appreciate being here. So I'm Bob Taylor. I'm coming to you from just outside of Boston, which is Liberty Mutual's world headquarters. We're one of the top 5 P&C companies in the world. And our legal department, just to give you a little bit of context, as Brian indicated, we have a large legal department. We're about 2,200 people worldwide. We have about 200 or just under 200 people that are in a legal operations function. That's the legal strategic services or legal ops. Many of you on this call have heard of kind of the legal operations explosion around the country and the world, and the focus on the business of law. And that's really what we're focused on. So it's really great to hear my fellow presenters talk about the do more with less conundrum. Jen, I love what you were saying about, disruption. We have a, little phrase at Liberty Mutual where we say it's called disruption if you're not paying attention, but it's called transformation if you are. And so we really work hard on paying attention to what's going on out in the marketplace and listening to those weak signals. So a little bit about, legal strategic services. That group is really about empowering our legal professionals to do their best work. So we're there in a support capacity to help all of our legal professionals absorb the tools in the right way, give them the right tools, enable them to deliver services at the speed of business. So that's really, what we're about on a day-to-day basis. Some of that might range from ensuring that we have the right law firms on our panels to represent our insureds and Liberty Mutual and making sure they're paid, appropriately and properly. That might range from, all the way to exploring a technology solution where we've deployed Blue Prism technology and bots. Our people, Byron, when we do deploy a bot, like to name them. So we've had everything from like Dr. Seuss's Thing 1 and Thing 2 to everything like to Optimus Prime. So they like to name their bots that do this digital workforce activity for them. So that's kind of the gamut of what we do. I figured what I would talk a little bit about today is some of the challenges around adoption, and then some of the successes that we've had in implementing some of this technology. So, Claire, I loved what you were saying about having to lay a foundational, digital foundation. I think that's so crucial. We talk a lot about digging your well before you're thirsty. And so kind of establishing that digital capability before you run into something like we're experiencing today. And I think this is a good reminder and example of why you need to dig your well before you're thirsty. So, in terms of adoption, I think, let me just say this, I think it starts first at the top with leadership. We're very fortunate to have a Chief Legal Officer, Jim Kelleher, who has dedicated a tremendous amount of resource to thinking about the future of law. And that's kind of what we do in my group. But, when people say, well, legal ideation transformation, what are you doing sitting in your office just thinking thoughts? It's not like that at all. I mean, we certainly don't have a corner on good ideas, and we take them from wherever they come. We have unbelievably innovative lawyers, paralegals, compliance professionals, support professionals that come up with great ideas all the time. But I think, Jim's vision was that it's very difficult to work those innovation ideas off the side of your desk. So if you can create a space where you can incubate and protect those ideas so that they can mature, and then once they're released out, they can survive, that's great. And I think, Brian, you've talked probably about this before, I think in some of your seminars, that if you release a concept or an idea too early before people are ready, before the idea is fully mature, people will beat the heck out of it and it won't be able to survive. And so part of our role is to means test those ideas, do maybe a proof of concept, put something out there and iterate and test until we feel like, okay, this has got some legs, and then we can launch it, to our internal customers. So I think that's a big part of it. And I'm very thankful to have the resources to be able to do that. But if you're in an organization that doesn't have the luxury of a large legal department like we do, or, most insurance companies have a larger than normal legal department out of necessity. I mean, we're a highly regulated industry, to say the least. So it keeps us busy. But if you don't, there are plenty of organizations out there, both small and large, that are willing to, help you on your journey and your implementation journey. Part of our success in addressing some of the adoption problems has been around engaging our stakeholders early and making sure that we are purposefully going out and addressing pain points and not having a technology in search of a solution. I think a lot of organizations or peers of mine have come up and they said, oh, we found this really great shiny new piece of technology and I want to implement it into my organization, when no one's really asking for it, or maybe there isn't that kind of urgent need, or maybe people haven't come to the realization yet that they want that technology. And so if that's the case, maybe it's our role to give people an understanding of what the art of the possible is, because people are so focused in on the work that's in front of them. And that's as they should be. That's why they're in the role that they are, and that's why they're so good at what they do. But it's our job to help them pick their head up a little bit and understand what's available to them, and maybe create that link to the technology and their use case, so there's a pull for it rather than us trying to push it. And so I think that's been a big part of our success in doing either vendor days or bringing thought leaders and senior people together and exposing them to technology like Prism or other, such technologies, so that they're the ones making that connection to the use case versus us jamming it down their throats. And I think that's made a significant difference for us. Also including them in that ideation process with the prototyping, the testing, the implementation, it reduces resistance, and also reduces the amount of rework that you might have to do. One thing that we found out, and believe me, we didn't come into this knowing how this was all going to work. I mean, we've been doing this about 4, almost 5 years now, which is shocking to me that it's been that long. But we've at first, really just wanted to tell people all these great ideas. And when you tell a legal professional what a great idea you have, they'll give you 67 reasons why it won't work. And that's okay, because, look, we've survived well over 100 years in identifying risk and mitigating risk, and that's what lawyers do, and we're good at that. However, if you show somebody a prototype, you can convert them from being an objector into a feature requester. What I mean by that is, all of a sudden I've now shown you something and you say, well, that's really interesting, but it'd be better if it could do that. And what if it could do this? And all of a sudden now I'm getting requirements, right? So instead of me telling them about it and them telling me it won't work, now they're partnering with me and working alongside of me. And so that's been a big part, I think, of some of our success. Some people have asked, what are some of the solutions that have been most successful for us? I think one is the creation of expert systems. There's a number of them out there, Neota, Brighter, others, where you extract the knowledge of the best of your folks and you distill that into an expert system that's client facing and allows for asking a series of binary yes/no questions. Is it this or is it that? And at the end, it will provide a legally compliant piece of legal product, to your internal client. So, Byron, to your point, this is about us adding capacity, right? We're all stuck with this do more with less conundrum, and we've been adding capacity by creating these client-facing applications. And really what we want our lawyers to be doing is working at the upper end of their license, and we don't need a 20-year lawyer working on, a basic NDA. But if we can get that client-facing and have them do that, and I know we pick on NDAs, they're contracts too, so we shouldn't, disparage them so much, but we've done this in a number of circumstances. So that's one. Intake is another. There's a number of intake systems, but really the interesting thing, Brian, that I think you've talked a little bit about is creating sensors out in the world, then getting multiple sensors that collect that data so that you're all of a sudden collecting data that wasn't available to you before, so that you can start making data-driven decisions. And I love that, Claire, about, you know, enabling people to make data-driven decisions that help you make better decisions faster, that lead to better outcomes. We're all about that. And I think we all could learn to do better in terms of training our legal professionals on how to consume that data on a day-to-day basis. So we've then take those intake sensors and put them into dashboards and help the practice leads manage their business. We've deployed bots in the payment space and in the reporting space, and that takes away manual work, you know, from folks, and that's really been successful for us. And then we've talked a lot about our law firms and helping them lower the overall cost of delivery by exporting this technology to our law firms, and that's been a big part of it. Last, I know everybody struggles with this build versus buy, and a lot of companies out there say, well, our IT people can build this. Well, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You know, there's a big part of that, and Brian, Byron, you mentioned a little bit about that. Like, you know, who do you want to maintain the software and do the updates for you, right? But sometimes, you know, you can look at your existing technology stack and find a solution there. Everybody wants to buy a product that is fit for purpose. They say, oh, this thing does that, so I want it for this. Well, you might be able to redeploy something in Microsoft 365 or Salesforce that gets you B work. And one of the things that we've had to do is say, sometimes getting a B is okay. You don't always have to shoot for the A. You know, if you know, doing B work is sometimes good, and it's the job to be done. So if you explore your existing technology stack, I think that's really a good idea. So, and then the last is like, have we found that there is any particular technology that's harder than others to deploy? I think the way we think about it is that products that suffer from poor design, especially around workflow and the logistics of getting data in and out of the systems, suffer from more challenging implementation. That's just fact, right? So I think it's more around design than it is around the actual type of application itself. So I'll pause there because I know we're gonna have a lot of questions, but those are just some general thoughts about adoption and implementation, and I'm happy to add on to any of that if you'd like.
Yeah, that's great, Bob. I think that's some good broader kind of strategic questions as we think about these things to bring all of the points together. Fantastic discussions from everybody, and the questions have been rolling in. I don't think I'm going to get to ask my own at all because there's good ones that came. Claire, there's one that came in right on the back of your presentation that I think actually is a really meaty question for all of us. And Byron, I might ask you to bring up the back on this so you get to cheat and hear what other people say and come up with some new thoughts. But given the breadth of your experience across different carriers, but it was your point initially leading in, Claire, with the Japanese market, and very traditional from a workforce standpoint, from a market standpoint, the agent and the insured connection, and then going into some of the developing markets where it's mobile first, and you know their first computer was also their first phone, and so things are just transacted totally differently. And then, you know, Jen, as we were talking, you hit on this moment that we're in where digital interactions are a must. And Bob, I love your point that it's not disruption. If you do it yourself ahead of the curve, then it's, would you say it's in transformation? I think this is sort of the crux of the question is, when you're facing these traditional spaces, how do we move them forward while also respecting, like there are reasons culturally, business-wise, and there's an existing business in place. How do we respect the traditionality of it, if that's a word, which it may not be, while also trying to move ourselves forward, especially right now where we don't really have a choice but to move our interactions forward. So I'm going to go around probably in the same order, but Claire, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Sure, I think it's a really good question, and one obviously that we've grappled with a lot with our Japanese business. When I first joined, the very first day that I worked at Prudential, my boss was Charlie Lowry, who was then the head of international and is now our CEO. And he said, the most important thing that you can do is not screw up Japan. So his first statement to me that day.
So super low pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't screw this up. And so by not screwing up, it means protect what they're doing, but also help them be better. And so we have experimented a lot with this idea of moving them from their traditional approaches to more automated approaches, and really getting at exactly what Jennifer described, this real conundrum between what needs to be human and what can be machine. And so we actually brought in, from a Japanese perspective, a group called the Nomura Institute, which is affiliated with Nomura Bank, but it's a think tank, because we felt with a Japanese expert advising on that human machine conundrum, they would feel a lot more comfortable exploring the boundaries of that. But ultimately what we ended up doing, we started by automating the application, which would seem like an easy thing to do and really important, because you'll end up getting many more of your applications come in good order. And so we tried to do that. Almost everyone wanted to default to sending us a scanned paper version of the application, which didn't solve the problem at all. We went through a lot of it back and forth on this. What we discovered was what they didn't want to give up was the wax seal that they put on the application. It wasn't even so much like the data. It was this tradition around not just a wet signature, but a seal. So we ended up being able to simulate that digitally, and that helped with that piece. But ultimately, we ended up having to take away the manual tools for some things. So activity tracking, they had these very detailed grids of paper where they tracked activity and they got credit for it and they got paid based on it. We wanted to move to an automated activity tracking that was tied to CRM that made it a lot easier for them, but it wasn't easier for them because they wanted to use the grid. So ultimately we had to sunset the tools they were comfortable with, move them to the tools that they were less comfortable with, but ultimately help them see the value in what those were. But it's been a very complicated journey. I'd love to hear from others how they've approached it.
It's definitely a tricky conundrum, Bob. You look like you're about to.
Yeah. I really love what Claire's saying. So I just want to jump in really quickly here and just talk about the kind of the strategy and the theory around what you were talking about, Claire. I love that about the stamp, right? How tradition plays such a great part in some of our industries. I would say that one of the mistakes that we made early on was not engaging equally both innovators and also protectors. The protectors are there for a reason, and they're the reason your organization is successful and has been able to be sustainable and survive for so many years. And if you engage one group over another, the other group will sink you. So you need to address them equally. And I think your strategy about engaging somebody locally the way that you did is brilliant. So I think that people would be wise to do that. And another thing we talk about in our group that I think dovetails very nicely to what you were saying, Claire, is don't tear down a fence until you know why it was there in the first place, why it was put there in the first place. And I think once you've proven that you've done that and you've exhausted the understanding of why they do what they do in the first place, then you will have agency and permission to go forth and evolve and digitize the process in that way. So Claire, spot on.
Well, it's very refreshing to hear that from the legal team. So
No, that's a great point, Bob. I think kind of the sense of what you're getting at is the notion of hubris, right? We can look at the traditional path and sit in judgment of it, like, oh, it's so slow and cumbersome, and why would they ever do this? And they just don't get it. And so we come up with something better and no one adopts it because we didn't take the time to stand and listen. And I see that with some startups where they sort of laugh at us as an industry without actually hearing what the issue is and why it developed the way it did. And at the same time, for people who are traditionalists who blow off some of the new ideas as a flash in the pan, or if both sides would talk and sort of mutually engage in the problem, there's no doubt we'd come up with something far better. But the sort of judgmental interaction from either the new or the old is just not going to get us anywhere. Jen, I'm really curious about your take on this.
Yeah, Bob, I'm stealing that innovators versus protectors because that is spot on. We have in the last 4 years really focused on digital. We actually hired someone from the outside who is not in the insurance industry. So it's been fabulous because he brings a whole different perspective. And we've kind of have digital channels throughout our organization. So there's a lot of innovator versus protector. And what we found is that if you can work with the protectors, like you said, understand what's in place and give them credit for what they've done and what they've built, but then ask them what the pain points are. Okay, so this is great, but what's not working? And then together you find the solution for what's not working. They feel part of the story. And that's really worked well for us. I think our bigger challenge has been around the technology stack and trying to take the innovative solutions and plug them into the older technology. That's where I think we've struggled more. But from a digital viewpoint, digital customers, digital employees, well down that path. I'm excited about some of the stuff we're doing there. How do we pay claims faster, more efficiently, that type of thing. But and I'm definitely on the innovator category, so I'm always pushing like, but wait. So it's definitely a combination. You have to approach it that way.
That's really helpful. Byron, you get to see across everybody. And I feel like a lot of the solution with what you guys build is bridging that gap where, maybe our legacy systems can't get there, or, we're trying so hard to move our process forward, but we've got all these considerations and it's super inefficient to deal with them the way we've been dealing it. And, at least a piece of what you guys do is bridging that gap and helping us to move forward. So I'm very curious about your takes, from a solution provider, but also a bit of a cross-company, cross-industry observer.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that, again, what Bob said about the protectors versus innovators, it's really important to get everybody involved up front and make it every part of everybody's idea, right? Because a lot of times what we see is the folks that don't want the change or at first, it's more about being concerned about their day-to-day changing dramatically. Is my interface going to change? I get through this is the way I do things every day. That's internally. Externally, your customers may expect certain things. Like Claire brought up that awesome point about the stamp. Culturally, you got to think about that stuff. When is it right for a customer to talk to a bot? And when is it right for a customer to talk to a person? And, there's a great moniker out there. I don't know who coined it, but your goal, a lot of times, like in contact centers or places like that, you're taking the robot out of the person, but not the person out of the equation, right? So let's speed that person up. Let's get them access to data faster. They're not going to complain about that. If we keep their interface relatively the same, but sometimes you can't, but you can make their job easier and you show them that at first, now you've got a champion on your side who's saying, this is going to speed us all up. And the customer who may want to have certain interactions, but then can also leverage self-service and have those options. It's the same concept. Find out culturally what's really important to automate and what you should not automate, and then find a way to get everybody involved up front to show them how it benefits everybody. And this isn't about wholesale change, reducing people and things like that. It's about doing more with what you have and being more effective.
Yeah. This webinar is turning into a copyrighted or trademarked catchphrase competition. I'm not going to say who's winning, but Byron, that's brilliant. That taking the robot out of the person. I think all of us can pause and reflect on that. Is like, what piece of what we're doing doesn't feel like it's adding value, and is certainly not why we signed up to do the work we're doing. Yet we have to do it. So how can we find our way around that? That was a great phrase. And yeah, Bob, you've got a couple as well that I've already written down. Jen, speaking of robots, everyone's best friend, Alexa, you mentioned some of the Alexa work, and it sparked a question around PII and data protection. And of course, as we move more digital, this is a common issue, is how do we stay compliant? How do we stay, putting the law aside, just protecting people's information? And this question for me always comes with this presumption that the way we were doing it was safe and secure before, that having reams of paper or scans or things sitting in Outlook was somehow not an issue. And now that we've digitized this process, we've created a risk without necessarily realizing where it was before. I'm curious, how do you guys look at that, especially because you do have medical and health related underwriting data? Bob, obviously Liberty does too, but plenty of the data is not that. It's more, structural about the property, people's driving records, et cetera. But I'd love to get into the PII and data privacy point. And Jen, maybe you can lead us off.
Oh, Brian, we don't have enough time for that.
Okay. All right. So next question.
And that was one of our platform partners that was presenting that. And they were presenting it as a future solution. And it's funny because I saw that question pop up, and that was all of us in the audience were like, okay, love it. But how do you get around PHI? How do you get around the legalities of the industry that we work in? And they didn't really have a solution for that. I think it was more someday this could be the way that we do it, or how do we get to the point where it's almost to the PHI standpoint, but then it doesn't cross over that. I know our legal team is obviously super sensitive to that, and the contracts we have with the platforms and how we're transferring that data, that remains very high priority for us. So it's not there yet from what I've seen, but it's something to think about, right? And how does that type of technology, and it's even generational. I have teenagers, and they're willing to put whatever out there. Like, they don't even think about privacy. And our son's like, why do you cover up your camera? No one's watching. Like, everybody's watching, you know. And it's just that there's differences. So I think as that evolves too, they're going to expect that type of an experience. So we as an industry are going to have to figure out, how do we accommodate that? How can we accommodate that? Working with the departments of insurance and working with everybody to make sure that we're still protecting what needs to be protected, but meeting them where they are. So I don't think it's going to be an option to put our head in the sand, but we're going to have to work together to figure out, how do we really look to see what those options could be in the future.
Yeah. And Claire, I'm really curious, given your international scope and the difference in some of those privacy rules and regulations, having exposure to the European market myself with GDPR coming out before what we've seen in the US, Australia's got a lot going on, Japan, of course. How have you navigated the PII, PHI, PCI kind of questions?
It's a really interesting question. Obviously, we don't have enough time to cover it, but for us, China is, there seem to be very few rules around it in China, so we use it as kind of a test bed in terms of testing where the limits are of some of this technology that we can use. On the other side, Japan, obviously we have the most customers there, but their rules are similar to the US in many respects. We had an interesting innovation recently where we had a genetic test that we wanted to bring to our customers because we knew that our segment of customers really valued information about cancer. And this was basically a cellular aging technology that you could take a blood test once a year, and it will tell you your cellular age versus your chronological age so that you can get a really early indicator on cancer. We wanted to make this available to our customers. We didn't want to deal with the privacy regulations. So what we did was we made it available to them for the data. They could use it as they wished. We wouldn't ever see the data. We would just say, you get this information, you act on it or don't act on it. What that did was it helped reinforce the trust that's so important between the company and the customer. Also gave them a tool that they really wanted for this particular group, which we called conservative well-off in Japan. They were affluent. They wanted to pay for this. They were willing to pay for it, I should say. And they were going to act on it, and it was going to improve our mortality outcomes, and it was going to improve their lives. But it was really looking for those win-wins where you don't have to skirt the privacy laws or even push the limits, where you can actually have the solutions work for you and work for the customer. That gets to where we're trying to play now, understanding that eventually, maybe when Jennifer's and my kids are older and kind of rule the world on these kinds of topics, we'll have some different rules around privacy and regulation.
Yeah. This always happens with these discussions. We have 4 minutes left and like 6 more really meaty questions that I wish we could discuss. I do want to maybe hit rapid fire on one of them. Around companies maybe outside the industry. This isn't referring to that, but I'd open it up to inside as well, or maybe service providers inside. Are there particular spaces or companies that you would look to as doing a really good job on this digitization front that you think we as an industry could learn from? And Byron, you don't get to say Blue Prism. You have to name someone else too, but we assume Blue Prism would be right there. So putting everyone on the spot, and maybe to make it even more exciting, you can't say Amazon. Does that sound fair? Bob, do you want to jump off, or do you need some time?
Well, so can I say Google too? No. I think what you're bringing up is something that we think about a little bit, and I don't have maybe a specific company, but what I do have is a cautionary thing, which is everybody says they want to be the Google or the Amazon of insurance, or the Google or Amazon of the financial services world. And I think you need to be very careful about where you set your expectations and your incremental goals and the things that you want to achieve along the way. Our competitive intelligence helps us understand who's succeeding at what in the industry, and you definitely want to do that. But I think you have to craft your strategy very carefully around where you are today and have an honest assessment of that. So it's great to have high aspirations of best in class of everything, but you don't need to be best in class of everything. You just need to be better where you are today. There might be segments of your business that you need to be best in class, but I think we focus more about being better tomorrow than we are today. And that's served us pretty well, as opposed to stacking yourself up to an organization where that's their entire business is built around that.
Yeah, that's good advice. Jen, do you want to give us your perspective?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of them, but I think the one that's probably the fun one at this point is called Lapitus. So it's literally underwriting with your phone. So you take a picture of yourself with your cell phone, different angles, and it does underwriting based on your picture and a few different questions. And so we're watching it. We're not using it yet, but it's a company that we're investing in, looking at how, because that could be the way of underwriting in the future instead of.
So no medical?
Nope. It's literally a picture and it looks at your age, your smoking status. It can do a retinal scan. It's a pretty cool company. Again, I'm sure, Bob, there's some legal and other issues that we're, like I said, not using them yet, but it's a fun one, something innovative for sure.
Well, on the flip side is you can't get your medical exam. I was talking to a life insurer yesterday who has 14,000 policies stuck in underwriting because of medical exam holdup. So yeah, again, necessity, right?
Yeah.
Now I want to go Google them and find out. Claire, how about yourself?
I'm going to Google them too, because it sounds like we could use them in China and it would help us, because facial recognition there is the way of the future. So what we are looking at is companies that have transformed traditional business models and turned them on their side. And there is one sort of tangential to our industry called Climate Core, which was a couple guys at Google who decided to deliver farm insurance completely differently. And what they did was they did a map. They created a map, a weather-related map of all the farmland in the US, and they went and approached individual farmers with the map of their land and said, this is what your climate trend is going to be over the next 10 years. We've already priced it for you. This is what your insurance would cost, and we're going to pay you before the event even happens because we're predicting it. Completely flipped the industry on its side and got massive market share very quickly by doing that. So we're looking at companies like that. We have some investments in some venture capital firms around the world that help us look at particular regions of the world and look for companies like the one that Jennifer just described. Just having that eye on the fintech radar landscape is just so important to know when these companies are bubbling up, what the new technology looks like, and where the future's headed. And there's a lot of great stuff happening in the future.
Yeah. Well, now I have something else to Google. So there's parametric, and this is like parametric, really interesting. Byron, how about yourself, given the breadth of view that you have and being on the cutting edge of helping people move forward? What's your take?
So I was going to say Liberty Mutual, specifically in the legal department. No, I'm just kidding. But mine's actually kind of a cop-out because I didn't have a really cool company off the tip of my tongue here, which gave me some time.
You were going to say Lapidus or Climate Core, right?
But actually, even though it's kind of a cop because it's a big company, it is relevant to take another look at Microsoft and what they've been doing with cognitive services, being able to take a look at real-time video, assess damage, things like that, things that people don't really think about with Microsoft. The cognitive services they built into their offering are extremely impactful and easy to integrate in with an RPA, with an RPA platform, and it's obviously a vendor you can trust and depend on. So I would take another look at Microsoft.
That's great, and a great example of bridging that gap because, big, traditional, large hierarchical, all the things we presume about why insurance companies might be stuck behind, and they've done some really cool things and continue to. Thank you, everybody. We went over and we didn't even scratch the surface on some of the great questions that came in. So thank you to all the participants who sent in those questions, to our panelists today, and to Reuters Events for putting this on. And as a reminder, you can register for the Future of Insurance November 16th through 18th virtual, so you don't even have to travel. You can even wear sweatpants if you want to attend that way. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Really great conversation. So much more to it. Maybe we can have a round two at some point. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.